name is Don Wettrick. I want to frame why I do a panel the way I do. This is probably going to be more of a conversation. They're all they're okay with cutting me off, interrupting, and so are you. If there's a question, you're like, no, I want some clarification. This is more of a conversation than it is a formal panel. I do not like the formality. Also, to frame this, I am a teacher of 20 several years, and one of the reasons why I'm here is I run a foundation that gets teachers to be the Trojan horses, to be the conduits of innovation in their school. I think that a lot of education is a little bit mired in the past, and so we're looking for at least one educator to be that destination. So if a local mayor, a local senator, or a local business person goes, I want to be able to know and talk to the kids and get some real things done, I want to tell them that there's some emerging things, I know who to go to. If that sounds interesting to you, and if your school does not have anybody that's working with us that started that foundation, let us know. We also run, and we're so grateful to be working with the IDC, we run the Innovate Within pitch competition, which is, by the way, the largest high school pitch competition in the country, and it's for my state of Indiana. So that's why a lot of these questions will be framed the way they are. That all being said, I want to have them introduce. Chris, we'll go ahead and start with you, and we'll work our way over here of who you are and who you represent.
Thanks, Don. I'm Chris Mormon. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for ReElement Technologies, and we are an innovative refiner of critical battery minerals as well as rare earth elements. So everything from the lithium it takes to make a battery, all the way to the neodymium and praseodymium it takes to make the permanent magnets for a drivetrain. And this will be, is this our second or third time doing this, Don? I can't remember. Anyway,
take 2 or 3.
But happy to be back at the BIC and have always had a lot of support from the BIC and really appreciate what they do for the battery ecosystem here in Indiana.
I'm Kevin Berry. I'm the VP of Engineering with Ateo Systems. We are a early stage startup that is incubated at the Battery Innovation Center, so that's why we're here, right? But our primary focus is on battery electrode manufacturing. So we are working to scale up manufacturing of that process, right, that was originally developed by the Department of Energy. So we are really, while he's maybe at the front end kind of the value chain with respect to getting the raw materials out of the, for recycling or taking them out of the ground and refining them, we're more toward the end of the value chain where we're actually coating the electrodes or the films that go into the batteries, right? So at a highest level, that's who we are.
Hi everyone, my name is Cam Peebles. I'm the technical manager in the battery group at a larger company called Alcogen. So Kevin's from a startup. Alcogen is about 10,000 people globally. And so we make specialty materials that go inside the battery itself and inside of a pack. And a pack in a vehicle is kind of composed of many batteries. And so it's really nice to be here. Excited for some good questions, so bring them on.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andrea Richter-Gary, Senior Vice President for Global Strategy and Engagement at the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. I promise I won't say anything longer than my title today, but I oversee a few different portfolios at the IADC, including energy, defense, trade, our federal government affairs, as well as our global government affairs. So excited to add some of that policy lens today.
Good afternoon. So my name is Neil Banwart, and I work for Energy Systems Network, ESN, a nonprofit here in Indianapolis, tied in very closely, of course, with the Battery Innovation Center. I'm also currently seconded to the Midwest Alliance for Clean Hydrogen, or MACH2, and we're one of the 7 winning hydrogen hubs across the country. So we'll get into that more in the panel discussion, but hydrogen fuel cell technology, I view it as very complementary to all the good work that's going on in the battery space. So glad to be here, looking forward to the panel.
All right, this does not have to go in any order, but again, through this lens of, I want you guys to explain what you're excited about. Like all roads eventually lead to education, because we're all going to look for those innovators, the talent pipeline. In your industry, or even maybe specifically in your work, what are you most excited about and want to give our students this insider information on the opportunities that you're seeing? Chris, you've been looked at as going first. Literally everybody's looked to the left and you were last.
I would hope the optimism of youth can definitely attach itself to an industry that is changing on a daily basis. We've seen in the past 2.5 years since the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, a massive swell in both investment as well as employment in the battery industry, as well as a continuing creative destruction in seeing, some technologies rise and fall, as well as, additional capital being deployed here in our state and around the country. It's exciting to be on the ground floor of something, and I think that today's high school students really have the opportunity, not that there hasn't been a ton of groundwork laid over the past 40 plus years with what Indiana did with EV1, as Dave mentioned earlier, but this is really kind of square one for the next iteration of the electrified economy, and there's just a ton of opportunity there. I would hope that our students want to seize that opportunity and want to be a part of something that is continuing to change and evolve.
Quick question, what's stopping people to knowing about some of these opportunities?
I'm sure you've probably got better statistics, Don, than I do, but a lot of people go into industries that they're familiar with. Mom and dad work there, family members work different places. That's probably not going to be the case in the battery industry because we've had an employment base here in Indiana, but it's not been 5-10%, like, saying I went to go work at a standard OEM auto manufacturing plant. So I would say just that introduction piece is probably the biggest limiting factor to getting kids interested, because opportunity is interesting, but not knowing anything is a strange place for kids to be, and I think even this Gen Z probably sees a little bit more. They're a little bit more cautious. So having that introduction, having that warm welcome into there's an opportunity here for you. I don't know what it looks like, and I certainly don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years, but if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to adapt, this is going to be a great place for you to be.
Okay. Rest of the panel, what are you excited about?
Yeah, I think kind of playing off what you said, batteries overall present a unique opportunity in the sense that it's kind of a combination of so many different, industries working together, I would say, and different expertise kind of across STEM, and also, people that are working in kind of logistics, right? So, my background is in physics, right? I was focused on really solid state materials, right, and ceramics with some thin film experience, right? And I've transitioned into this space where we're doing a lot of work with composites, right? It's all about composites, and then it presents a scenario in which we have to kind of think differently, I think, as a nation, because we're very reliant on supply chain woes, right? So it presents a unique opportunity in the sense that you really, from start to finish, you have to have innovation across the whole thing if you want to be competitive in a global economy.
Just to jump in, I think on the application side, it's so multidisciplinary too. I have a 12-year-old who likes science. Okay, great. So what do you want to do? You can, work on batteries. Okay, well, what does that mean, Mom? It means you can go work for Andretti and go to Monaco having race cars. It means you can go to space and power satellites. It means, I cover the defense portfolio. What does battery technology and EV mobility mean for the warfighter, right? So when you start to think about how do we actually take this and harness it for economic competitiveness, it's pretty cool, right? So I think that would be the message to say, get in this field, learn in it, and you have so many different applications for it.
Can I double down on that?
Please.
The reason why I like that is that, sorry, is the moderator. I have a hard time not interjecting, but I like that because you were giving an example of something that's already local. I'm all for STEM programming, but sometimes the specifics of what's in your own backyard is sometimes for those of you not in Indiana, we have this reputation of being humble. There's nothing wrong with that. Midwesterners are like that, but sometimes you have to beat your chest on the opportunities that are in your own backyard. So I love that answer.
Indiana for the bold, Don. I just have to put that's our state motto now, our IEDC.
Love it.
And maybe I'll jump in here, and I want to thank the IEDC for providing a grant so that we could apply for a hydrogen hub, and that investment that the IEDC made directly translate into a significant win for Indiana and for the Midwest, and it's going to create thousands of jobs, clean energy jobs, in the new energy economy. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to receive these federal funds and then putting them into action and really hiring, the next generation of workers for the energy transition.
Dan?
Yeah, so broadly, what am I excited about in the batteries? So I think everything. Batteries are very, very, very fun. I cut my teeth on batteries about 10 years ago for the first time when I was in school, and really have never looked back. In talking with about 3 years ago, 2 years, a trio of people won the Nobel Prize, right, for inventing the lithium-ion battery. And I was just talking to one of them the other day, Stan Winningham, because he started, at Sony back in the 70s, right, and 60s, and he created the battery, and he's still the most passionate person about it, and about educating people about how batteries work, and how every time I pick up, like, my iPhone, the technology that's in that is evolving every day, and every person on the planet has a chance to impact it, right? Like, batteries just are all throughout everything. You're on your person, they're in your vehicle, they're in your home, they're in this microphone, right? That's just what happens. And so I think it's just an endless landscape of opportunity, and you just have to be able to give that opportunity to people, and then they can really roll with it.
Love that.
And
Yes, go
just
ahead.
one thing there, right? So as you're saying, right, batteries are really ubiquitous, right? So there's been a huge focus on EV, right? I mean, everybody in this room knows that that's a huge focus, right? But that shouldn't be taken away from, as you were saying. I mean, they're really in everything. So you don't just have to have a battery company that creates batteries just for electric vehicles to have a successful company. Right? It's a kind of a key thing, right? Something that we personally have been focused on a lot. So overall, just definitely want to say, I mean, there's opportunity kind of across the supply chain here, across people from many different backgrounds, many different cultures, right? And our team is pretty much everybody on our team is new to the battery industry, right? From kind of our inception. So we've gone through the growing pains with respect to kind of training people, and really, so I definitely shout out to the BIC, right? Part of the reason we've been so successful is because of a place that exists like the BIC, right? Where we can come in and they actually give us that real exposure, right? We're not doing science for the sake of science, right? We are trying to run a business, right? So if you're trying to develop a technology, right, and this is something I made sure I was going to say at some point during this panel, is that if you're trying to develop a technology and it's not scalable, it's probably a waste of time. And scalability has many different aspects, right? From supply chain, right, to overall deployment. Do you have a customer base? All these things are important to think about, right? And we have a lot of different opportunities here, right? It's not just EVs, right? They're the huge focus because it's the biggest market, but there are a lot of different other opportunities in this space.
Uno reverse card. What's scaring you? What's bothering you? What are your deep concerns? Also, again, any of you, especially on we're looking future, right? So we've all got excited about certain things. What is a deep concern, especially if you're explaining this to a 17-year-old?
Can I start there?
Go ahead, please.
Supply chain, right? Lack of manufacturing capability, right? So the people that have talked to me since I've been here, I'm very opinionated about these things, right? But what I've said to multiple people, right, is that batteries are not semiconductor, right? So we don't have a stranglehold for really the whole world on batteries, right? And so we have a huge competition, right, from both an economic standpoint, and you could argue in terms of just kind of our moral compass, just of how we approach things, right, in general, with respect to batteries overall, right? Because we don't really own the supply chain. We don't manage at the largest scale, manage the raw materials necessarily, right? And we also don't have manufacturing capability here, right? So in the U.S., we're really good on the academic side, right? And we're very smart, right? We put a lot of investment in that area. So we understand very well how batteries work, right? But there is a lack of understanding and education with respect to manufacturing, which manufacturing is what's going to make the world go round, right? So.
Boy, Don, I didn't realize you brought your red flag to wave in front of the bull today as far as fears go, but I would say personally one of my biggest fears is the misallocation of capital. I feel like we identified a solution without really thinking through all of the steps to get there. There's been a lot of hand-waving on details that, while I'm all for creative destruction, let's not just put a huge trillion-dollar pile of capital in a pile and burn it. That's not eco-friendly or capital-friendly, as well as falling into the North American or even Western world dominant view of, well, we're always the best, so we're competing against each other. China sets the price on everything we're talking about, whether it's a lithium carbonate in your battery, whether it's the battery cell, whether it's the pack. We need to be a little bit humble as the West, saying we are starting with a 10, 15 year, head start, or we are behind by 10 to 15 years. Not to say we can't catch up, that shouldn't be self-doubt, but it should be the humility of realizing that China is setting the price on all of this. It is incumbent upon us in this industry to align a value chain to say we need the best possible product to compete with the person who sets the price. And the person who sets the price can torch capital for as long as they want to for political ends as opposed to economic ends. So we shouldn't be looking at each other as competition. And I think the Battery Innovation Center has done a great job of bringing people together and the cross-pollination. I mean, who here has worked for 2 or even 3 different firms that have all been big clients? Putting people into positions to succeed. So I would say our lack of humility in the West and our misunderstanding of the problem is a pretty big risk.
Interesting take.
I agree.
So one of the things I'm concerned about with zero emission vehicles, whether it's battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell, is the premium associated with that versus the gasoline or the diesel counterparts, and can we absorb that premium? Can we narrow that gap, right? On the hydrogen fuel cell side, for instance, a hydrogen fuel cell truck is probably 3 times as expensive on a CapEx perspective as a traditional diesel. So you're way out of the money on a CapEx perspective. And then on an OpEx perspective, for clean hydrogen, you're $15, $20 a kilogram versus $5 for diesel. So you're way out of the money on a CapEx and an OpEx basis. It's really difficult to convince major trucking companies to convert to a zero emission solution, be it battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell, when the economics are just so far out of whack. And there are things that we're going to do. We're going to scale these up. We're going to bring the levelized cost of hydrogen down. We're going to bring the price of a fuel cell truck down. But I am concerned about that gap and how we close that gap.
That's a good one. These are all good points. I also think about the economics quite a bit too, but I'll talk more about charging, right? Charging infrastructure as it applies to electric vehicles, because that's kind of what the hot topic is now, right? So I'm based in Southern California, San Diego. There's 1 million chargers out there. There's 1 million electric vehicles. You come to places in the more Midwest, you still have some, but the population's significantly lower. And I'm going to posit that a large part of that is like a fear of charging, right? Charging vehicles is a very difficult task, and it takes up a lot of infrastructure that is not in place right now. And so while there may be millions of people who want to adopt into the electric vehicles, that price point is definitely a hindrance. The charging network needs to be improved a lot. And that's something that America is trying to do with DOE incentives and whatnot, but it's still just not up to snuff, right? When you compare it to filling up ICE for 5 minutes, no one wants to stay around for an hour. So that's one of the things that keep me up, I guess.
And I think coming from the government side of things, all of these ring really true, but it's that the clock is ticking. We feel a very finite moment in time where some of the federal incentives are bringing a cost parity that wasn't there before to attract some of this industry. So when we think about, Indiana's Economic Development Authority, how do we take that momentum and that window and ensure that we have the ecosystem in place to attract that technology, to pair it with the right capital to make sense, that we have the opportunity to have our companies take advantage of federal incentives before there's a change in the direction of those policies, or if there is a change. So and do we have the toolkit and the capacity to do it? I mean, speed to market right now is actually one of the biggest incentives we can give. It's not the grants, it's not the dollars, it's can we make a decision or a package 4 weeks faster than our competitor state when it comes to some of these deals that we're doing. So it's just how do we keep up? How do we keep up with this momentum and influx, and can we do it in a way that is strategic for our state's long-term health?
Really quick question for follow-up question then, Andrea. So what do you see we're getting right on policies and incentives, and what is a magic wand, what we're not doing, and what you would like to see?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, what we're getting right is I think we were ahead of the curve, right? So when we talked about these huge geopolitical dynamics, we had, Inflation Reduction Act, Infrastructure Act, CHIPS, all of these great federal programs are saying do this and do this now to bring that cost parity, in addition to kind of this drive for clean energy and sustainability, right? So those are the two pieces that we're influencing. Well, how does the state look at being competitive for those types of grants, competitive for those types of companies, so that we can lead the charge? And the good news was we had already taken some of those steps. We already have the manufacturing base. I mean, you mentioned that's going to be a tricky thing to actually manufacture batteries. Well, it's also manufacturing solar panels and glass and semiconductors, all the things we weren't making here. We have the workforce that can do it with a little bit of training. So we had that built in, and that's a huge asset. And then if you look at kind of the federal grants, they're not just, putting dollars for national security and competitiveness, that's part of it, but it's also community investment. So when you look at a program like READY, and for those not familiar, there was 2 different tranches, $500 million leveraging matching funds to go towards community investments, right, or infrastructure, or other pieces that have the quality of life. That's actually what's making some of our companies most competitive to get this administration dollars. So we already had that baked in as a way to enhance those competitions. So what we're getting right is we were already there. It wasn't hypothetical, it wasn't done, and we're seeing some of that pay off in the Hydrogen Hub or the ME Commons Hub for semiconductors or our Tech Hub in bioscience. So I think, again, that's what we're getting right. I mean, the magic wand, you could probably ask the state legislature for, when we have more tools, incentives, it's probably not mine. But I would say, again, it's the capacity to be able to keep up with this, right? I mean, we have a great table over here at the IADC. I mean, we can't move these deals forward enough, right? So it's how do we continue to take advantage.
Can I make an addition to that too? So I think I'll go piggyback on top of that a little bit. Not only is it how do you keep up, but like America is so far behind other parts of the globe in terms of if I'm talking strictly about batteries, battery production, manufacturing, that I think instead of how do we keep up, it's more like how do you leapfrog? How do you step ahead to the next one? So I think one of the things that American policies maybe could be better at is let's give money for the next generation of batteries, right? That we can maybe do faster than these other countries or continents are producing, as opposed to trying to kind of keep up with them, which the policy right now is kind of geared more. So really challenge all these, Kevin, or I think it was you said there's a lot of smart minds, right? Challenge the smart minds to make the next generation of good things instead of the current generation. And then,
as I hear first of all, Chris, the humility thing has got my mind buzzing, and then really in talking about that sense, the difference between, first of all, I love open competition, it makes everybody better, but where is the Venn diagram of collaboration and competition? If there needs to be a bigger sense of humility, then that would, I say, we should start skewing more on the side of collaboration. But how does that work, whether that is a state versus state, of we do this here in our state, or even on the sense of global humility and working with other countries. And this could be too pie in the sky, but do you guys have a crack at where collaboration and competition still can be friends? Please.
You guys all keep making me go first here. I feel like go ahead.
So with respect to humility, right, definitely, right? I think that I just want to address because this is important. So I think that, Americans, and American kind of pride, right? I would say I'm pretty patriotic overall, right? But there's definitely a strong sense that we are better, right? In every way, right? And the challenge that brings with respect to trying to onboard a manufacturing process which we outsourced, right, 30 years ago, which has been kind of, drawn a circle around with respect to kind of the control of the supply chain, all of that. The challenge that brings is that we've got in our minds that we are the torchbearers with everything. And so in terms of kind of the approach for how you would, kind of maybe go about ensuring that the workforce kind of has, things in mind, is instilling a sense of, okay, hey, the competition is good, right? In the sense that, I frankly, I would say that historically, maybe I'm more on the side of, okay, I like globalization in a general sense. I think that, as an academic, I have an academic background, very much so, it's open communication, right? Open communication facilitates a lot of different benefits, right? But when it comes to national security, right, and then also kind of diminishing workforce equality and all these kind of very challenging issues, right, got to be mindful right? That if you're going to kind of offshore manufacturing, right, you're going to have to there's going to be a debt to pay eventually, right? And in this case, right, if you really want to have, U.S.-based manufacturing, right, and you want to train your workforce for that end, you have to be mindful of the fact that, and I've had conversations with people in local communities where it's like, oh, hey, just how do you feel about manufacturing, right? It's like, we're talking about, opening manufacturing facilities here in Indiana. It's that, well, are you doing it just so you can take it away again? I've been asked that directly, right? And so, you've got to educate the workforce, right? There's a lot it's not easy. I don't have a solution, right? I'm just, kind of addressing that, yeah, I mean, there's a sense of, of humility, because like Cam was saying, it's, on the academic side, we're very good, right? We understand, there's people out there, they understand to the T how batteries function very well. They understand how to optimize things very well, but, we can make one of the best batteries ever, right? I think that James Fleetwood is here somewhere. He and I had a conversation a couple years ago. It's like, if we want to make a ray gun from a battery, right? We can, right? Because we can make a really great battery. It's going to cost $1 million a battery, though. So, what do you want to? If you want to be competitive in a global market, you got to be competitive on a price. Everybody cares about their bottom line, right? You're not going to reinvest all your money into something. It's just going to. I mean, we're running a business, right?
I would just say, I mean, the short answer is yes. It's essential that we have kind of global and open connections. It's been a huge focus of the IADC, of this current governor, the last 6 or 7 years. We were just in Mexico City last week on a trade mission, and yes, we talk about nearshoring, but also friendshoring. So when you think about the supply chain in North America to bring that over in certain critical industries like, semiconductors, there's a value to that, right? So you're right, maybe I can't say this, not always Indiana or not always US, but there is a strategy between having partnerships with whether it's geographic neighbors or like-minded neighbors that are able to share that technology, and that has a real national security and economic goal. So I think at the global level, it's hugely important for supply chain. And what we can do as a government, right, because we're not always in the weeds of kind of some of these industry-specific deals, is we can help shape that framework. So we were actually the first US state to sign post-Brexit an MOU with the government of the United Kingdom. Hugely fruitful. We actually just had a working group session a few weeks ago on AI. We were the first state to do so. That's bringing in their best and their brightest ideas from their policymakers, from their research institutions to tackle some of these issues together and help organize some of the activity that's going there. We know we're not in every piece of it, but we can act in that way as a state to convene and partner and find other countries that would be able to mutually benefit from that technology. So I think that's the really, global piece, and then bringing it down to the state and local level. We're doing the same with our neighbors across the board. I mean, the hydrogen hub wouldn't happen without Michigan and Illinois, right? We had a stronger proposal bringing together that economic ecosystem here in the Midwest, and that's an approach we're taking across the board. And all of that matters to the local communities, right? All of that matters to the 200,000+ Hoosiers that are employed because of a foreign direct investment in one of these industries in the state of Indiana. That makes those strong, strong communities and families, more economically prosperous, but we have to tell that story of how do you take these huge trends that matter and that it can affect your daily life, and that's part of what, our job and my job is.
Interesting. Cam, I'm gonna look at you on this one because you're a California guy. I've been listening to a podcast about site selection and what all goes into that, and a lot of it goes into what talent pipeline do you have. Clearly, California has had a reputation for a long time of having talent pipeline. Not that people from Indiana want to take advice from somebody in California, but I was hoping I'd get more laughter out of that. Darn it. But if you were in this sector we're talking about, what would you want to see from other states on their dedication towards the talent pipeline?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing I've noticed in the past 10 years is there's been an increasing amount of student engagement in the battery field, right, and in the energy storage field. And in places like California, a lot of that stems from the fact in high schools they're starting to put in classes and education systems specifically for energy storage. Kids are starting to learn about how a battery works in high school in a lot of California schools. And for me, you're 16, through 18, you're impressionable. Your mind is just a sponge, and as you start to collect these ideas that, well, this battery is really cool. It encompasses physics, chemistry, math, all the way up the supply chain to doing like policy, right? There's all of those involved, and they're all learning about that. Part of that in California just could be because some of that education is slightly different, right? And sometimes more progressive than other parts of the country. And so I think it all starts very fundamentally at a young age, right? And so if you can engage younger audiences and younger people with curriculums that are more based on energy storage, they'll be more likely to get into that talent pipeline, right? To go to school for batteries or for energy storage or for STEM in general. And then if you can do that in other states, right? If other states can adopt those curriculums from an education standpoint, then you're inherently kind of breeding like a new generation of like these STEM battery people. And I'm only talking about batteries specifically.
Sure.
But I think that's a big thing that you can do there. Just get kids when they're young, because that's when they're going to be the most interested.
No, and rest of the panel as well, because I'm wanting to get that selfish wish list, because if there's emerging sectors, it's our job as education people to point them where things are going, skating where the puck is going, right? And so for the rest of the panel, what would you like to see from K-12 and colleges to get this pipeline more robust?
Yeah, so one thing I would say is, advertising and talking about what we have already in the Midwest, right? So steel, right? Northwest Indiana produces 20 to 25% of the steel in the United States. We don't talk about that very much, but that's an opportunity. We have that. We've got tons of jobs up there. An opportunity to decarbonize. We can introduce, clean hydrogen into the steel making process, and then suddenly, you're talking about a really cutting edge technology in a legacy, industry. So, advertising what we have and thinking about how we can use those existing assets and transition, I think it's a really exciting story. And getting into the high schools, getting into the trade schools, the community colleges, the universities, and talking about, this energy transition and how you can marry essentially what we have today with what's going to be, relevant in 20, 30, 40 years down the line.
Yeah, I think at the highest level, I agree with what you're saying. I was in a conversation yesterday with a group that apparently is getting some new DOE funding for some more outreach type activities, trying to get in touch with local colleges and high schools and trying to get exposure, saying that, hey, there are transferable skills, right, from the jobs that, your parents were working, right? Coal miners are one example, right? And you mentioned steel industry as well. And leveraging existing infrastructure. I think that overall, and something that we've taken individually as a company as an approach in terms of trying to scale up our manufacturing process, is working with existing manufacturing capability here in the United States and existing experience, right? So all in all, it's a difficult problem. It's kind of the problem of our age, right? Is that what you're learning in school is going to translate into a working job scenario. And I went to college for 11 years, right? It's not as long as everyone, right? But in general, I would say that the skill set I gained through that, right? The experience I gained through that. I think all in all, if you have a desire to learn, I think that that's probably the biggest thing, right? And for anyone that I would hire personally, right, is that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to have all the experience in the world. If you are willing to learn and you can participate as a team, right? If you can work as a contributing member of a team, it's kind of like the core skills that your parents tell you or that you learn in elementary school is like, hey, if you can't play nicely with others, you're probably not going to be successful in life, right? And in this type of situation in which we're trying to have a huge energy transition, coming back to your question, you asked a question before about collaboration. You have to have some internal collaboration, and for local companies, right, that are smaller companies like us that are trying to scale up our capabilities. It's the phrase that somebody said to me is that it's like a sea that kind of raises all the ships right together, right? Rather than if you really try to go at it alone, it's going to be tough, and then if you need a couple $100 million, and maybe you'll be okay for a little while. But if you're not gaining knowledge about how things are really working, making sure you have a good product that you can sell, collaboration is going to be key for kind of getting you those insights, right?
And I think there's a few good examples going on that are reaching into the K through 12 schools here in Indiana that employers are doing. Actually, some of our major OEMs are doing. It's helping the kids visualize what does a job in manufacturing look like. So writ large, I think manufacturing can be a challenge to get, I don't know many kindergartners that go, I want to be in manufacturing. So what does that actually mean and what is that connotation? So they're bringing, VR glasses into the classroom to say, hey, it's maybe not what you saw in a movie of what a factory assembly line looks like. It's very computer oriented. It's using your stem in this way. Like, this is what your day could actually look like, and getting some of that practical hands-on, so it's not just theoretical. And I think we've seen huge growth in some of the retention and attraction that these employers are seeing in their regions, sometimes very rural communities. So I think some of that outreach is happening, and then we as a state, how can we support that type of technology-driven learning and excitement?
I mean, obviously, CAM has the benefit of having beaches and mountains and everything in between in California, and Indiana, no matter how much money the legislature gives us, isn't going to be able to buy those things. But values, it turns out, are pretty cheap to inculcate, and I think that that mentality of behind every problem is a solution waiting to be discovered, that needs to be what Indiana focuses on. That needs to be the message to our K through 12 kids, and also that it's a mission-driven or a purpose-driven mission. That you can be a part. No one is going to solve climate change by themselves. No one is going to solve the energy transition by themselves. But you can be a part of a team that does big things. I think we've gotten really good at diagnosing problems or shouting about problems, but we haven't done a great job of actually enabling people to say, I can be a part of that solution, whatever part I can be. But if you inculcate that there is a solution out there if you're willing to find it, I think that's what we can really do to kind of jumpstart the adoption of new industry and the interest in these industries for the workforce we're all going to need here.
It's funny you say that. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about how
also about site selection?
What's that?
Also about site selection?
No, different one. This was talking about like how rural America, especially young men, are trending to be a little bit more patriotic. And they were talking about the fact that some of these things, these initiatives, are patriotism. We're talking about how in some ways the humility is one thing, but like we're in global competitions, and that there may be a pathway to a call to help save your country or help your country in some of these areas through some of our rural students. So I wanted to follow up that because I found that really, really intriguing. Another tough question though, what are the main challenges facing the battery industry regarding sustainability and environmental impact, and what are certain companies doing to take that head on? There's some uncomfortable looks on this one. Yeah, go ahead.
This one, I guess I will jump in first. There's a lot of what happens off screen doesn't count in this business, and I think that is hypocritical at worst, but detrimental to the industry at best.
Yeah.
The fact that we don't actually see what it takes to purify the lithium here in the United States, because we just don't do it. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have an environmental impact somewhere else. So to call something, zero tailpipe emissions, that's just very disingenuous. That's an accounting trick, not an absolute. I think on sustainability, we've even seen, one of the competitors of our business, Li-Cycle, was trying to basically do the Chinese version of refining with American characteristics and found out it can't be done because we have an EPA, because we have work standards, because we have all of these things. Yeah. So we need to stop. I'm not sure if it's humble to try and copy somebody else, but we need to double down on innovation and say that is what the United States does best. That is what the Western world does best. That is what, since the Enlightenment, we have done well. Why on earth would we try and copy an authoritarian system that we know you couldn't do here because of all of the things that we've said that doesn't pass by U.S. standards or by Western standards? So there's a lot of work to be done, but I think being a lot more honest with ourselves and with our consumers about just the fact that it wasn't tailpipe emissions doesn't mean there wasn't an environmental impact to get to this point.
Jump in.
I appreciate the directness. Because, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that there is a lot of hypocrisy, right, that takes place, right, in our industry overall. I question if you really do the analysis. I haven't done it, right, and, you know, so this is probably something you guys think about, right, very directly, is that, yeah, from, like, you know, whatever, the start to the finish, right, if you do the mining, you do the refining, right, are the carbon emissions really less, you know? That's the real question. So, you know, it's like everybody wants to talk about how batteries are very green. And I think that if done right, it can be, right? And, you know, on our end of the process, right, so as I mentioned before, kind of down the value chain, right? So we take the raw materials, like what they produce, and we incorporate it into the battery electrodes, right? And so the most expensive portion, right, from a greenhouse perspective and also just a money perspective of that manufacturing process of the battery electrode is removing solvents that are in the system. So these solvents that are used are very harmful, right, for the environment. They're harmful for people's health. And so, I mean, I don't know what the regulations are in China, but they're, I suspect, limited in terms of making sure that those don't go out into the environment. Here, obviously, we're not okay with that, right? And so, the EPA has some regulations on if you're a large enough producer where you actually have to recover those solvents. And so to one point, right, that I can say about what we're doing, right, in terms of, like, as a company, to address that, you know, in our process, it is more green in that we don't utilize, right, any volatile organic compounds, right, in terms of those solvents that are used, right? So at the highest level, I think you can't just, it's not just at the beginning of the chain, it's kind of across the whole thing. If you really want to have manufacturing here in the US and you want to do it in a way that is aligned with our values and our regulations, right, while simultaneously making sure that you actually don't have, you know, you're trying to influence the carbon footprint, right, there's a lot that has to be done there on the innovation side, as he had said. You have to think carefully about that, and I do think that the US, we are the ones who can figure it out. And I do believe that. And I mean, yeah, I mean, we set the precedent. People still look to us for leadership, right? So
I think overall, just, I appreciate the industry-specific details, and we just need a pragmatism towards how we partner with heavy industry to meet different decarbonization goals, but in a way that, yes, utilizes innovation, but again, makes sense as we continue, growth and competitiveness. The state of Indiana has been one of the only states the last 2 years to participate at COP. So this is the UN Conference of the Parties on Climate. So we were in Dubai this past year as part of the Bloomberg Green Summit. And I think what really came out of that COP at the highest levels is to achieve these really ambitious goals for sustainability and climate change. We have to work with the steelmakers. We have to work with the OEMs. I mean, Neil, you gave the great example about 25% of steel being made here in Northwest Indiana. The emissions from that area is actually more than the city of London, right? So when you think about outsized impact, that's where it can come from. But there has to be a dialogue, and there has to be an array of technologies that we're okay with adapting at even an incremental pace sometimes to be able to do that. So I think as a state, we're trying to hear different perspectives to still do things cleaner and better and faster, but at a way that makes sense with our steel producers, our cement producers in southern Indiana, right? I mean, we have a huge amount of cement. Mitchell, Indiana, Heidelberg Materials just announced, $500 million from the Department of Energy for carbon capture that might make it one of the first zero carbon cement in North America, right? They're doing it in Scandinavia already. So it's having that discussion, and again, adopting whether it's hydrogen or carbon capture to supplement some of this across industry that will actually move the needle. So I think that's our perspective.
How are battery companies leveraging data analytics and AI to enhance performance, and what kind of impacts are you seeing?
Can you repeat the first part of that? Sorry.
Yes. How are battery companies leveraging data analytics and AI?
So, yeah, we just had a good presentation, right, from BiteRat. They produce a good solution, right, that kind of addresses some of those challenges, if not all of them. Every decision that we make, we try to do it based off of data-driven decisions, right? So as was stated, in that presentation, I mean, the amount of just raw data, I mean, we're a small company with the amount of batteries, right, that we're producing and testing, prototype batteries we're making for customers for a variety of different tests. And the amount of data that we produce just as a smaller company, it's frankly a little bit astronomical, right, in terms of just kind of organizing that and really looking like, okay, organizing metadata and ensuring that, you've got price, you're looking at the price, so you're also looking at the performance, and you're looking at, okay, the long-term cycling of the batteries, right? There's a ton that goes into doing it and doing it well, and I think that overall we're still learning here, but, not just us, America overall, right, is just learning how to utilize that data in the most efficient way. But I do think that the companies that kind of crack that code, if you will, are going to be the ones that are probably the most successful. So it is of utmost importance to do that and do it well and have a good organization of your data overall.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I think also, how many people have ever used ChatGPT in this room? Everyone has, right? So when I think about AI for batteries, it's super similar. You ask ChatGPT, like, write a letter to my boss because I'm too pissed off to do this right now. You ask AI for batteries, get me a warranty for the vehicle, right? I think Penny, I don't know if she's still here, but from Byte Rat, the company that's going to partner with BIC, I think that's a very exciting move because what it does is it allows the BIC to kind of move ahead in terms of using data-driven analytics to make smarter decisions in batteries. And you really can't make better batteries without making, you can have 100 minds in a room, but if you can have a computer screen all this data for you, you're going to make batteries a lot faster. So the AI also ties into like progressing our innovation in America. Andrea, as you were kind of saying, like it kind of just speeds it up without us even having to be a part of it, which I think is a really exciting part about like the machine learning and AI-driven stuff. So yeah, so kudos to BIC for making that big step. I think it's pretty awesome.
All right. Last question for me, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. And this is kind of a rapid-fire question. Go in what order you want. And this is kind of a catch-all. What is the one question you wish people would ask you? What is misunderstood, and what are you wanting to clarify that is, like, I wish people would ask me this more? Whether that's policy, how you guys go about, what you guys do. What is the one question you would like for people to ask more? While we're waiting, you guys can formulate your questions. I'm just going to go ahead and look around as you guys are thinking about that. And now I'm going to just look at Chris because I've known him the longest and have him forced to go first. Chris.
Thanks, Don.
Yeah.
I guess I wish that people would ask what the biggest risks to the energy transition are. We've talked about supply chain a lot. We've talked about China, 65% of the world's lithium, purified lithium, 95% of the rare earth ores. I mean, what we saw with Germany getting cut off of Russian gas at the beginning of the Ukraine war, I believe The Economist published that it was $20 billion worth of natural gas from Russia supported $2 trillion worth of GDP. If we looked at what a shutdown of supply of either lithium or rare earth elements out of China would look like to our economy, it'd make $2 trillion look like a rounding error. It's everything from the cell phone in your pocket to the hard drive magnet on your computer to the Tesla to the power tool. I mean, it's all of it. And there is, I think we've kind of made this mad rush towards electrification as the solution. I think it's definitely a part of the solution. I think hydrogen's a part of the solution. I think that fossil fuels are going to continue to be a part of the solution. I know that's probably not the most popular thing in the world, but it's going to take a combination of these things. And when you start looking for silver bullets and realizing, boy, if the firing pin doesn't work, that bear's going to get me. That's the one thing that I wish people would be a little bit more honest about or a little more circumspect about, saying, what are the big risks here and what kind of redundancies do we have? Because the just-in-time economy worked great until COVID. Yeah. And then we realized, uh-oh, boy, when it doesn't get here just in time, I've got supply chain snafus 5 layers back. And that's something that I just don't think we're probably as honest with ourselves about as we should be as an industry and from a national security perspective.
Maybe to pick up on that, I guess I wish people would ask me, like, what use cases are the right ones for clean hydrogen? versus battery electric versus other technologies. I think, you know, sometimes we do look for that silver bullet and we just think we're just gonna electrify everything, or we're just gonna have hydrogen fuel cells that work for all vehicles, right? Regardless if it's a passenger car or an 18-wheeler or a boat or a train. And so I think you have to be really specific about the use case and then apply the proper technology to that use case. I think we need to spend more time thinking about that.
Question that I wish I was asked more, and again, being at the BIC has given me the experience to have the understanding to know what is already being done to produce batteries. People just asking simple questions. Do we even know how to manufacture batteries in general? I think, and you know, and he's done a good job outlining most, I think all of it really, but it's just that, as he had said before, is that things happening, we're okay with things happening behind the scenes, right? Not in my backyard.
Right.
I'm good with it if it's not in my backyard. And that kind of mentality, now everything's a black box. So we don't know how to synthesize. We don't know how to even mine it, right? We don't know how to code it. We don't even know what we don't know. Right. And so I think that, you know, other comments here that were also kind of questioning resource allocation. I do share the concern as to whether or not resources have been allocated in the right way, such that we could even, because it's like, it's the same kind of mentality about the transition from ICE, right, to EV. Really, there was no big push. You know, GM, I come from a GM family, by the way, but there was a big push, right, going full EV right away. There was no discussion about going to hybrid. So kind of that mentality, and it's the analogy I use a lot, is that, you know, it's like, okay, we want to start from what is very established and making it for a long time. We're very good at manufacturing it, and jump right to what is perceived as the, you know, the better solution. We want to go there now, right? But there's not very many questions asked about, okay, you know, the infrastructure. We all knew that we had to do something about it, but it's kind of a similar thing with respect to just even the core kind of fundamentals. Like, do we even really understand how things are made? And if we don't understand how they're made, how can we propose a better solution? I hear a lot about really great technologies, and I go to these conferences and I hear a lot about really cool stuff. And that's what it is, it's cool. But I don't know if it's actually scalable. And that concerns me a lot. And so, recapping, if I was, you know, the question I wish I was asked more is, can we manufacture in the same way that our biggest competitor in the world is actually manufacturing when it comes to batteries right now? And the answer is no. The collective answer is, can we get there? Yeah, okay. We can.
Very good. Cam?
I guess, you know, don't ask me this, ask other people, but like, is everyone on the same page, I guess, would be my question. So, right, like there's some good things brought up. Chris, Neil, you guys just brought up good points about like what should we, you know, what batteries should apply to which thing. You know, I worked at a national lab which is funded by the Department of Energy. I've worked heavily with academia and with partnerships, and I've worked in the industry a lot. And you know, the DOE is handing out billions and billions of dollars to do all this funding to schools. They're handing out billions of dollars to industry to make these facilities in America. But like, are the expectations of the American policy being met by industry? Is industry actually collaborating well with academia? So it's the trillions of dollars going into research at UC Berkeley. Is that going to be useful at all to like a company like Tesla? Like, if it's not, you have to change. You have to refocus. If the DOE is not meeting the good expectations for like vehicle mileage or something like that, and the industry is just like, okay, whatever, just give me money, which is oftentimes the case, that's not a good thing. So is everyone on the same page in terms of what needs to happen for electrification in the future? I think is a good question.
Right. And the question I wish I would get more is, why Indiana? So I know a lot of you know the value proposition, but I'm not sure everyone does, and we'd love to share that story about why it's a great place for battery innovation and manufacturing.
Awesome. Questions from the audience? Good. Yes, Ben. Personal impact of battery in your lives.
Batteries in general, or?
I'm going to take this first. I'm just going to see the cell phone. I think, like, I grew up without a cell phone, right? Because I'm like a little older. But like, then the cell phone was introduced and everything changed. The classroom is different. The way you can power your home from your cell phone. You can do more advanced calculations on that than you could for 100 years, right? It's just incredible. And the cell phone is completely charged by lithium-ion battery, which was generated 40 years ago.
So prior to ESN, I worked for Cummins for 10 years, and part of my time there, I was in the mergers and acquisitions, the M&A area, and we started looking at zero-emission solutions, and there's kind of two in transport, you know, the battery electric or the hydrogen fuel cell. And so I got exposure to battery electric, which then led me to hydrogen fuel cell, which led me to the Mach 2 hydrogen hub and all that. So my life is a lot different because of battery electric technology at Cummins.
I mean, Cam, you took the good one there, I guess, right up front. I mean, yeah, personal perspective, I would say it's, you know, similar to Cam's. You know, career-wise, I mean, most people with my background, right, end up working in semiconductor or, you know, for Intel or similar. And, you know, coming into the battery space overall, I mean, it's afforded me with some very unique opportunities. And I mean, as is mentioned here, I mean, it's really working on the cutting edge in so many ways, right? From manufacturing, right, to R&D, right, which we do, you know, we do both. And so, I mean, I guess overall, it's helped me grow as an individual, if that's the, you know, at the highest level, right? But no, but in all seriousness, right, it's afforded me just the push for batteries and electrification here in the U.S. overall has afforded me some exceedingly unique opportunities, right, career-wise.
This might sound a little strange, but I would say the dispelling of darkness. I mean, you read any ancient text, you know, whether it's Plato or the Bible, and it talks about light and darkness. And in my lifetime, because of batteries, there has never been a time when I wasn't able to push a button to dispel that darkness. And I think that that really does kind of separate us from all that came before, because boy, when it was dark and the only answer was starting a fire, good luck if you don't know where you're starting from. You know, I think that really has kind of pushed us into a level of modernity that is different than any of the generations that have come before us.
Agree with all of that. I think as a motorsports fan, as we enter May, I went to my first Formula E race in London last year. I didn't miss the engine sound. I loved it. It was fantastic. I'm sold. I'm there. We'll be traveling to see them. So.
Yes.
So I think one of the things we've talked about today is education. And Indiana does a really good job, both K through 12 and college, in modernizing our education for manufacturing, for technology, et cetera. My question to you guys is, how do we keep the brain trust in Indiana? What do we need to do to change the drain to the coast and keep them here locally?
Sure. Well, I can jump. I am a testament to this. So my husband and I moved here in 2017 from Washington, D.C. So I came back to the Midwest, and I think, you know, we've touched on it before. It's that narrative of the quality of life, the cost of living, and that the innovation is happening here. It's not a distant, all the things we talked about today are happening here in Indiana, the types of jobs, the types of experiences, and I think it's how do we tell that story, and then, you know, not to sound like a broken record, I talked about the READY program, we're putting money into communities, and that's not just Indianapolis, that's not just Fort Wayne or, you know, other places, it's across the state from tip to say, like, we understand that people want a great place to live in addition to a great career path. So I think all of that is gonna hopefully pay dividends, maybe not in 2 months or 3 months, but, you know, in the next 3, 5, 10 years, and we're gonna see that growth continue.
Yeah, I can't. I got to jump in on that one. Thank you, Grant, for that question. You clearly got my $20 tip. I'm dying up here. Like, no, darn it. What we're trying to do is, ironically, get students out of the state, get them to build a network and bring them back. We have our top 10 competitors, our top 10 teams. This year we're going to Washington, D.C., build a network, come back home where all your support is. And I know that we have a really strange statistic, but in Indiana, more people live closer to their mother than in any other state, which you can laugh at all you want, but as a parent of 3, I love that fact. And actually, in COVID, it got better. More people wanted to be back close to mom and dad since the pandemic, and I think that we're really welcoming, and we want to have our best students stay in Indiana. Shameless plug for Indiana. Anybody else?
I would say, as kind of Dave alluded to again, the battery bloodline of Indiana. You can't swing a dead cat at a battery conference without finding somebody who worked for Interdel, EV1, or any of those, even the failures. And Indiana doesn't do the best job of being willing to fail. Yeah. But out of those failures, we have built, people like Bob Gallion, who's probably responsible for the deployment of more lithium-ion batteries than anyone else on Earth. We've created the BIC, which I really wish the BIC would probably tell their story a lot louder. I think that from a national and international perspective and industry perspective, I mean, the work that's been done over the past 10 years by this organization and the individuals who have led it has been absolutely incredible. We probably need to have it back home again in Indiana for the battery business, where we bring those people back. Michael Canada was running a battery startup in Arizona. We've got all of these people who have an Indiana connection, and being able to bring them back and say, we might have failed in the 1980s or 1990s with the EV1, but we learned a lot. And if you've got gray hair in the battery business and you've been here more than 3 years, that probably puts you on the upper 50th percentile of experience in this industry. And a lot of that experience was hard fought right here in Indiana. And I think we need to acknowledge the failures, but acknowledge the growth that came out of those and tell everybody to come back. I mean, say, hey, we are a state that is top 5 in pretty much every economic development, Andrea would have the actual statistics, but, we pride ourselves on a place that is a great place to do business, a low-cost place to do business, and has world-class universities. Let's come on back and say, hey, guys, you've been here before. Let's try this again.
That's actually all the time we have for questions. I know that they're going to stick around. If you guys have any questions, you can meet with them after. Oh, do we want to sneak in one more? Okay, if you guys want to speak to them afterwards, I'm sure they'll stick around. But thank you guys so much for a very heartfelt and honest panel. You guys give us hands for our panelists.